Hello there, my friends. Hey, we are live on the YouTubes and on TikTok. And thank you guys so much for being here tonight. This is going to be a presentation that's a little bit different on something that I really have wanted to share for a long time. And this is part of a new channel, new series. I oftentimes have used this channel as something to host videos for different groups and programs that I'm in and to talk about stuff that is a little bit deeper. Now, I was planning on doing a live call tonight. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll have to stick around and see how I feel with it. This is part of the Myth of Man series. And one thing I know about doing live streams is I should jump right into it and not talk so much in the beginning. What do you think about that? All right, let's go. There's a myth that men are told about success, about failure, about how they become better people, how they avoid pain in their lives. And to me, it's not just a myth, because in working with male pain for 20 years now, over and over again, I see that this isn't just a story that we're telling people. We tell men how to be better in this world, how to survive and strive and thrive in this world in a way that is never going to work, that sets them up for failure over and over and over again. So, what we're going to talk about tonight is part one in this series of The Myth of Man, where we talk about the idea of how men are supposed to succeed in life, how they're supposed to not fail, and how our culture does this over and over again. This isn't about ideology. This isn't propaganda on manosphere topics. This isn't meant to make you hate or distrust anything. This is meant to do what I've done over and over again, is work with people who have problems to get to a solution. That solution is almost never hysteria. It is never blame. It is never hatred towards somebody else. And that solution follows a very, very hard and unique path. So I want to start off with something that is not inspirational here, that is something that very much has to do with reality. And I have to be careful about how I talk, because so many people on, so many platforms on social media do not allow this to be talked about. So men never think it's going to be them. They never think it's going to be them. When you look at an addict, and imagine this in your head, when you look at an addict, you think, I would never do that. In fact, I'm asked very many times that what is the point where somebody decides they're going to be a heroin addict or a cocaine addict or a meth addict? When we as a society look at an alienated father, a guy gets divorced or he's going through a custody battle, he can't see his kids, he's broken by it. We always think we could handle that better, that is the result of him failing, not being strong enough, not having the right frame. He didn't have the right religious values, in that because I don't have that, maybe yet, it's because I've done these superior things. When we look at a homeless person, a forgotten veteran, or somebody with PTSD, somebody who's had trauma, we think, okay, well, they didn't get the right help. Maybe you're a vet and I beat PTSD, or I watched, certain videos on this and I side with these people. And when we look at the ever growing amount of angry, young, isolated men who cannot date, who are involved in all sorts of ideologies that, we might see as extreme or they think is normal. They can't have girlfriends. They can't have success. They have less value in here. They have depression. And we think, man, that guy's broken. What did he do? And what we have to understand in this is that, yes, all those people have to be responsible. As if you've followed me or what I talk to people about, my general message, what we're going to hear more and more in this series, is that if you are one of these people, which you could so easily fall into in our culture, yes, it's not because you're weak. It's not because you're stupid. It's not because you didn't do something right. It's because it's easy for that to happen in our culture, but it is your responsibility to work out of it. Your difficult and painful responsibility. And so many men that I've worked with for the last 20 years have had this echoing in this other separate thing, which still exists. This still exists today, of where they feel ashamed because they didn't do something right. But the thing is we live in a culture that is causing extreme, consistent, predictable pain to men where the solution does not work. And in having this job that I've had, which is kind of a unique job, I didn't expect for this to happen. I've worked long enough to see this collapse have a pattern with different themes, different men from different backgrounds. And when you see it enough time, you stop believing that it's just a myth and you start knowing that men over and over again are delivered a lie about success, pain, solving that pain, and the pain they carry and pass on to other people. So for 20 years, I've worked with a lot of time with addicts, recovering drug addicts, alcoholics. And within that, that opened up a whole bunch of stuff to abuse, to alienation and early childhood that they experienced, then to alienated fathers, to fathers who couldn't see their kids, mothers who couldn't see their kids, the parent that gets destroyed by the court system. I've worked with veterans who were left for to do nothing. They were depressed. They couldn't work. They were around other battle buddies who told them that they beat PTSD or they weren't doing something right. They couldn't figure out why things happened. They became addicts. Later on, they became alienated fathers. I've worked tremendously with young men for long periods of time who were angry, who were isolated, who wanted to be popular, who wanted to get women, who wanted to date. And they're seen as misogynists, that they chose to be evil, to hate women, to want sex in the worst ways. And if I say that word, it gets banned all over. Like if you discuss this problem. And the thing is when I worked with them, my goal was always to walk them to a point where they could achieve a goal that made them happy and functioning. That road, in that success, I was successful in it, still am successful in it. It doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look how politically correct culture wants to see it. It does not look how the manosphere wants to see it. It doesn't look how kind of anybody wants to see it. And I'm not saying it's the only road, but when you take, something we all agree upon, let's say a veteran who dedicates their lives to the service of this country and comes back with problems and they have failed solution after failed solution, and there are good people working with vets, and the path of them getting to a point of functionality, getting to a point of wholeness, getting to a point where we realize the deep unraveling of these wrongs that they entered into doesn't fit the narrative of what healing, what being a good man, what becoming a good man looks like at all, from any angle. The men's movement, politically correct culture, and many, many, many things in between. And so our culture tells us over and over again what's supposed to be successful, what's supposed to be a failure, how we're preventing those things. And all of that is part of the lie. Again, I am not telling you this so that you get angry, you become radicalized, you just want to say F it to everything. This does not solve anything. Like those groups do not have a high density of people who become functional. Okay, those groups, if they do, in some ways, more power to them. But what I know from these roads that I can individually go through in long, long, different sets of things that you do to better yourself when you're in these situations, which are very complicated, very unique. Becoming an angry person, needing to fight hysterically about our culture is never part of the answer. For a drug addict to get clean, for somebody with PTSD to get functional, for a man who wants to have recognition in the world, no longer be depressed, not be hated for wanting to date women, an alienated father winning custody. Yes, our culture is a huge part of the problem, but you need to focus on the job ahead of you massively. I'm not trying to say that our culture does not need to change, but if you stay broken, it really doesn't matter if it changes or not. So, with all of these people that I've spent just countless hours working with, all of them shared the same lie. The same lie. They shared the lie that that won't be me. I'm different. If I do the right things, I'm safe. They believed that failure was a choice, it was a mark of your character. They believed that collapse only happened to other men. That belief is not strength, that belief is ignorance. Now, in doing this today, January 2026, I did 8 hours of calls before this. It's 9:41 p.m. At noon, I started calls, no stopping until 8:03. In that, I talked to a man who found out this weekend that his child was kidnapped. That man never thought that would happen to him. That man has pain that you hopefully will never have to experience. I talked to a man who is a veteran who does not want to talk about his mental health issues for the rights that he deserves because it could affect a different court case he's going through. I talked to another man who cannot function in this world, serve this country, cannot get a job, cannot motivate himself, cannot do anything. I talked to another man who's an addict and he's trying to get clean. He is clean and going through the hard times of that, hard times of the different discriminations that he runs into. Over and over again, you hear this. None of those men thought it was them. None of them. In fact, years ago, I remember a good friend of mine telling me what he asked me. He said, "What does somebody think when they're doing cocaine? Do they think, man, I'm just going to be an addict? That sounds like a good idea." And eventually, this is actually what happened to him. Then he talked to me about getting clean. He's clean now. This is part of the lie that we have with our pain. And what I want to talk to you about, without promoting cultural hysteria, we have these repeat problems that nobody thought they'd run into, that they never thought they'd have to experience. We set ourselves up, we walk into a trap over and over again. And again, super common. A man in our modern world could face extreme custody challenges. Could happen to anybody. It's very easy for it to happen. Very easy to go to jail for that. You do all the right things. It's not because you weren't enough of a certain religion. It's not because you chose the wrong person. It's not because you didn't hold the right alpha frame. These things happen. Okay, very easily. Very easily. You could have so much pressure. You could lose your job. You're 3 paychecks away from being homeless, and this could happen to you. And when that happens, it could unravel trauma. It could set you in a state where you cannot recover normally from. All of the things that are supposed to save you, that have saved you through all of your life, don't work anymore. And it happens to men, and we're blindsided by it, and we think it's because we were somehow a failure and we made a bad choice, and we just have to tough it out and be bad to the bone or something like that. So let's start with this. Addicts. This is one of the greatest teachers of my life. If you don't know this, I've been in recovery for almost all my life since I was 14 years old. It's a huge part of me. There's parts of that which wrote absolutely who I am. And then there's parts of recovery which have absolutely defined my life and my clarity. It's one of my proudest things, being an addict. I love it. I have no shame whatsoever. Now, I know a lot of people do, but it is one of my best traits and what has allowed me to work with so many people. So being an addict is not weak. Most addicts I've worked with will understand a deep level of pain. This is what we talk about. If they get clean, they usually process it. They have huge amounts of insight. Okay. But what they didn't have was a structure that allowed them to properly get clean. And this is one of the nastiest industries that we see out there. So I'm familiar with what they call traditional forms of recovery, familiar with all sorts of experimental. I've done many of them. I'm a fan, but I've watched so many people die of them. There's a video that I have on YouTube that talks about the use of ibogaine and iboga, which is like the hottest thing. 7 years ago, I worked at one of the first ibogaine aftercare centers in the world, and I watched many people die that I would not have liked to see. I watched almost a 100% relapse rate. And again, if you define it in different ways, it means you could define it however you want. But to me, if you get drunk or do heroin again, that would be called a relapse. And within that, I also think there's a great, great value to ibogaine or iboga. But we take on this thing of not telling the truth about it. Seriously, not telling the truth about what the process of recovery looks like. And it's like this amazing thing. We have, Jenny Craig style rehabs, if you know what that is. We have all these different advertisements of what is going to cure addiction, give an addict a hug, all these things, incomplete false solutions that people with real pain and an ever growing number of people have, that are given this solution that does not work, and the cycle returns. And before the story fails, we get testimonials on the high point. People say it works. They advertise the thing that will sell, and they don't talk about the real story of what works. Now, addicts have always had a huge outlet for things that work, but it may not work for everybody. Okay. It's not either or any of these different things. Like if you do a smart recovery, a 12-step recovery, or whatever, like if you had a bad experience with that, great. There's other options. It's not that like it amazes me to this day that we still do not have alternative therapies like ketamine or plant medicine working in unison with other things that have worked, like 12-step recovery programs or therapeutic recovery programs, and they all work differently to promote some sort of capitalistic agenda. And I think there probably are people doing that, but man, I have never understood why that has never happened. Now, perhaps the details of that are something that we could discuss, in future live streams and so on. But this is a huge thing for me, a huge, huge, huge topic. When addicts fail in our culture, we say something like they didn't want it bad enough, they just didn't try hard enough. Addiction isn't cured by insight. It isn't cured by a philosophical idea. It is arrested by structures, containment, long, hard therapeutic work, huge work with many, many different things. And without that, relapse isn't a failure, it's going to be predictable. And really think about this. How much information, and maybe you may not be able to know this, how much information about addiction comes from actual long-term experience of things working? All of the newer ideas do not have that. All of those new ideas could be great. There could be good things to them, but they're 2 years old, 10 years old. They've not been challenged by what we see over and over again in first world Western culture with different ideas of addiction. It is an amazing, amazing anomaly that with confidence, we go out as a culture saying there's a solution for that. We go out with confidence saying, man, just give an addict a hug. Man, the opposite of addiction is connection. We just need to connect, and this does not work. These are good ideas of why we may have an excess of addiction and addictions in our culture, but why a problem started You don't just add more of that to get the solution. And it's almost a denial of what the animal of addiction is. All those people who coined those phrases, great people, do great work, but their catchphrases were misinterpreted by culture and created systems of extreme capitalism that have killed, tortured. And actually, if it didn't kill you, you went on to live once again as somebody in this culture served a false solution so you could blame yourself as to why that's happening. Let's go over the second big figure that I've worked with, and that is fathers in custody, alienated fathers. What do we tell alienated fathers? What do we tell fathers? What do we tell the guy who found out this Sunday, this Saturday, that his child was gone? Doesn't know where this child is. They're missing. Their child is kidnapped. What do we tell a father who is everybody in his social circle is calling him an abuser, somebody who has done horrible acts to his children? What do we tell fathers that? And I know what they tell fathers. It's, you got to be calm, you got to get over it. Did you really do it? Well, she's the mother of kids, don't blame her. You shouldn't be angry. Being angry is bad. Take the high road. All those things are good. As somebody who can literally say, I have walked thousands of men through the high road of pains and custody battles, I will tell you, man, all that advice sounds great. But if you do any of it, it will help you get further ensnared in the family court system. Any first world Western country, Australia, Canada, England, France, the Netherlands, the United States, Mexico, you will, if you take this advice, it will help you fail. And yet, that's what we hear. They go to their priests at church, they talk to their imams and their mosque, they talk to anybody they can talk to, and this is the general advice. He loses his case, he's stripped of his identity, he is stripped of his routine, his purpose, his job, his reputation. The proximity of his kids are taken away. The identity, the purpose of being a father is removed. And he is supposed to still, after all of this happens, he is supposed to still be calm, be patient. Don't be an angry male. You know, another interesting thing, I was talking to somebody today. He was in prison. We're helping him with his case that I believe is a false accusation case, where people will tell me I shouldn't do that because what if he did it? I've looked through this whole case, and I'm very selective about who I work with in these situations. And everybody has turned their backs on him. The whole, in this case, a church, they're called as witnesses. He's got to figure out how to cross-examine them, how to prepare different questions in all of this. The people that swore their lives upon him hate him. And in hating him, it isn't just to do the right thing, it's to make sure that he knows that he's hated. With that, he's got to walk forward. He's got to structure his case. He has to remain focused. In talking to somebody who's in these situations, they're going to be angry. They're going to be somebody who's depressed. They're going to be somebody that has a lot of the natural emotions towards that. In all of our culture says in that situation is to throw that person away. Those ideas are toxic. Those ideas are bad. Why are you talking to a guy in prison? This person should be thrown away. Well, there's guys in my groups who have beaten this. There are men who've been accused of that and proven in the courts. I don't know if you know this, but that's very hard to do, for the courts to say they were wrong about the abuse that they felt happened or they said happened. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, he went through a hard thing. You know, bad stuff happens to bad people. This is a person whose life is shaken to the core. And when I talk to these guys and they know I understand because it happened to me, is they say, man, it's crazy because you don't know what reality is anymore. You spent days and days and days and days of being hated, of being told by everybody that you were an abuser, that you were a toxic person. It was a fun conversation for your ex friends who switched on you to be able to pass the time about the gossip about your life. And this was your reality for years. Maybe it was only months. But to go through that, we tell the guy, man, walk that high road. Now, some people's cases are not that extreme. Maybe you're not like me and you talk to somebody who is in prison in one day and talk to somebody else whose child is kidnapped in one day. And I talked to a bunch of other people who there weren't these extreme things happening, but the breaking of a man in that happens. Every single man in that is going to become angry in a way that our society would say is toxic enough to throw him away. Every single man in just who is alienated from his child, just can't see his child, just going through a divorce, just the small thing that we say should be easy for him to take the high road over. They're told that he's being toxic. All third parties, when they interview him, and he's hoping, he's like, man, CPS is finally going to step in, and they see him as an abuser first, that he gets upset about it, that he argues with them. And it's not just an argument of logic, it's seen as somebody who is unstable and potentially violent, and he's further labeled that over and over and over again. This is a problem that is predictable and consistent and happens in our culture. And because now he's unstable, now he fits the checklist of anger, we can throw him away. And it is not our responsibility. We told him, take the high road, read the inspirational book, go to the yoga class, learn how to meditate. But he's still angry. So he's gone. All right. Let's move on to the veterans or somebody who suffered from addiction. These three things come together: addicts, vets, PTSD. You could be two of those, you could be one of those, but this person does not get help. We have an ever growing culture of celebrity vets. We have an ever growing culture of people who talk about PTSD and how they overcame it and it was easy. And there's a value to this. I'm not against that. Just as I am not against alternatives for addiction recovery. I'm not against it, but let's tell the truth. That's not every vet. I don't know if it's the majority of vets who can't relate with them, but a lot of them, a huge amount to create an industry to create a subculture of homeless vets that's not working for. So a lot of times with veterans, we get them to function. They're not a liability. They're not going to unalive themselves. I said that word on a live stream the other night and TikTok banned me, or they gave me a 10-minute censure. They're not enough to be an embarrassment to the United States military or whatever country they were serving. And then they're good. If they can achieve that, right, it's seen as a win and a success. There's nobody telling them what that process might be like. There's nobody telling them of what happens if PTSD flares up again. In fact, it's seen as something that just goes away. And so when we get that low bar of, okay, they're functioning, they get a job, they're no longer an embarrassment, they're not discharged from the military improperly, success. And when this disappears, what happens to the lack of motivation? What happens if they do become homeless? What happens if 10 years later they have issues associated with that? And I will say that the VA does try and do a good job with this. It tries very hard. It's trying a lot harder than our culture in general. What happens though when our culture doesn't understand them? What happens when our culture says, so and so just kind of slipped a little, and they didn't do their yoga and meditation and journaling enough, which are great. I'm not against those things, but it takes more. All right. And when somebody can't stabilize, when somebody can't get functional, once again, abandoned, removed from the support system. In fact, most vets that I know, when something doesn't work, they just say, man, I just didn't like it. I didn't like the meditation retreat. I didn't like the therapeutic circle. I didn't like the other vets that were involved in this, which is fine, right? And again, there could be a responsibility that all these people have, but then they go and isolate, and the same things come back, and things do not get better. The general public can't understand, doesn't owe them anything. And what's so interesting is when we see the generations, right? We started to go to war in the early 90s, and then in the early thousands, it got, a huge density of that. We now have generations of different anthems of watching the different problems that vets go through. Immediately coming home, 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later. And in each of those things, there's false solutions that are there that send a message that does not equate, that does not give anything that will fully work for them. I get it. Some of it will, but it doesn't. And we look at the angry kid, angry young men. We have angry young men. We have all these pundits becoming popular and famous from the angry kid. Well, the angry kid wasn't born hateful, just like the addict wasn't born saying they want to become an addict. The angry kid was ignored, he was mocked, he was shamed, and then we go, oh man, bullying, let's enforce that. But let's do it in the right way that cuts out certain people and this sort of thing and favors different people. But then the angry kid, he isn't popular. He's not good with women. If he brings up the idea, a force of nature within him of dating, of sex, of wanting to be that, he looks out at the world and he sees this world of like awesome guys, just like the vet does. You see the celebrity vet, he's ripped, he's got it going on, he made some money. You see, you're the angry kid and you want more success with women. You see the buff dude and he's kicking butt and he's saying all these things. He's with all these women. And you go, man, I want to be that guy. And then he can't be that guy. He tries, he fails, he gets in trouble at school. His school says, man, you used those pickup lines on women. This is toxic and misogynistic. Tells his parents he's embarrassed more. He isolates more from that. Okay. His pain becomes something that is seen as a threat, is seen as something toxic, is seen as something evil. He wasn't any of those things. Now, this is something that I said for many, 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 many years because I saw it, right? The men's movements that taught men about dating did not hurt women. Other men were hurting women. I get it. They were saying all sorts of misogynistic, horrible things. I'm very, very critical of these movements. Those movements hurt men. There were other men going out and doing all these crazy things. This could be hard to believe because when they're saying and promoting these messages, those messages may not be good. They're not nice. It is not good to have zero experience with life and then objectify other people. That's not good. It's not good to have certain perspectives towards women just for no reason. That's hurtful. But did that cause the acts, the actions of actual misogyny against women? Well, people can argue that and people can hate that, but let me tell you about what pain that caused men. What pain that caused men is it gave them a belief that this would work, that men had pain. Why do these things exist? Why do we have such a sea of men who have no purpose? They feel worthless. They're hated by people, that they're going to believe in clowns that are going to have an answer for them. The fake superhero. They're going to believe in the Santa Claus of masculinity, right? And then they go out and try it and it fails them and they're shamed more and they become hateful. And when they get shamed more, guess what's waiting for them? The generation before that of men who've become radicalized, the real, actual dangerous men, the few men that are actually causing harm, they're the only men that accept them. And so they're not given guidance, they're welcomed by pundits, extremists, people who are willing to radicalize his thoughts, turn it into an ideology that makes him feel like a part of something because his culture rejected the pain that he had of wanting to fit in. We sit there and we go, man, but the solution is going to be education and it's going to be making him aware. We're going to up the propaganda or whatever it is on how we don't become toxic men or whatever. And this was it. I remember years and years ago, I asked my kids to define, how would you define toxic masculinity? He said, oh, well, and they're like 10 or something like that. So, well, dad. And they explained. And I just thought, man, that's not true from what anything I see. And the explanation would be that our culture has the patriarchy. Now, there could be all sorts of things to this, right? My 10-year-old sons just gave me their imprint of these things. And they said, the patriarchy taught men to suppress their feelings so they don't know how to feel. So they learned a misogynistic form of perspective and feeling. And if they just learned how to feel, they'd be better. Every single man. Okay, so let's go through this. Every single man. Every man. Now, how could this be possible? Every man that was an addict, every man that was alienated from his kids, every man that was a repressed young man that was alienated by our culture for his desires of wanting to date, every vet with PTSD, they all tried to tell people about their feelings and they were told to shut up. So toxic masculinity is saying that we created this form because we told men, boys don't cry, man up, all these different things. And if we just took those things out, this would be the start to teaching people great, right? The false solution, right? False solution. I'm not saying that's not part of the solution. I'm not saying that might be a good small sliver piece, and some of it is not. But to think, then we go, man, if the vet's depressed, he should have just told his feelings. He did. He did. You just didn't hear. And instead of saying, man up, shut up, boys don't cry, it was a politically correct culture that said, when a kid said, man, I want to talk to this girl and I'm going to go and research these pickup lines. And then he gets called in by his office. They said, this is bad. You have crossed the line. When a man loses kids in a custody battle and he can't see his kids, the mom gatekeeps, whatever. And any parent who does this is bad. Man, I know women go through this. And he says, man, I'm so angry. I can't be angry. It's not anger was taught to you. No, you feel angry. You hate yourself. You have all sorts of things I can't say online. You have ideation of unaliving yourself. You have all these things that will be normal, but they are unhealthy, but they're normal for anybody in a situation who has his child kidnapped, lose their child, death of a child, all these different things that I deal with regularly. And we say you can't feel. What's the difference? What is the difference? You can't feel. All right, so what's the pattern that we have here? Okay, different men, different lives. One thing I didn't bring up, I changed the presentation for this right before, but I was going to go over some of the things that men had written to me when they were at their lowest times. For some of those men, that was their last message. One of them, I have permission from this from him and his family before he passed. And that guy was rich. That guy was wealthy. That guy was an MMA fighter. That guy was a badass. That guy was awesome. Fit the image of all the things that were supposed to be successful. And there were other people that were also what our society would call losers. Different men, different lives, same pattern. Pain that was regular, consistent from our culture. I get it. There's a difference between an addict and a lonely kid. They had some sort of insight and short-term solution given to them with a guarantee. You go and do ibogaine, you're going to be cured, man. I watched the Netflix documentary, and those vets went down there, and it was great. And that's actually interesting because in that documentary, they say you have to do things afterwards. But so many parents who paid for their kid to go to a rehab and they paid 80,000 bucks trying to get their kid clean, 4 12-step rehabs, and then all of a sudden these places in Mexico that don't have any regulation, or Costa Rica or wherever, can charge $20,000 for the miracle drug, which can help, right? Or it's not a drug. Medicine, plant medicine. It's amazing. I've worked with tons of people who've done it. It's going to help sometimes, most of the time with the withdrawal symptoms, but there's a whole thing afterwards that we need to be very real about. You have to get the proper aftercare, and hopefully that aftercare has proof of people who have years of recovery afterwards that you can meet, and it's not just a picture of the day they got out and to help sell you on a $7,000 a month plan. So we have pain that's given a solution that is short term. After that, the structure disappears, the individual collapses, and our society has no responsibility for it. Over and over again, that addict, father in a custody battle, kid trying to get some purpose in his life with dead ends. And so the truth here is that the men's movement has done very little to help these people. So many of my clients come in and they're indoctrinated by looking at the alpha male myth reality. They're indoctrinated by the red pill and they go, man, Steve, dude, you need to, man, I don't know if you know this, but I know I work in this industry. They're indoctrinated on the idea that masculinity is lost. Read Marcus Aurelius, man. Read it. And all these things are great, right? All these things are great. But here is my problem with so much of that is I helped these people and still help these people from zero to finish. I want you not just functional, I want you to be able to succeed with life, and I am responsible for that. Now, we could have disputes, we could have breaks, you could be done, you could be off on your way, but I do not sit here to sell a 90-day program or a 6 months and then we're good. If you have any of these problems, you have a lifelong solution to them. There is no quick fix. Okay? So we have a culture that is full of pain, that has handed men solutions and then stops before it resolves itself. I get it that things like the red pill is this philosophy that sounds really good. Where's the lineage? Where is it? Where is that? So I've done this for 20 years. I have people who've been in my groups for 20 years. There was a guy on my calls yesterday. Well, actually, there were about 9 of them that have been with me for over 15 years. Okay. Who've had different successes in their life. Their image of success is not what feeds a reactive culture in pain of what success looks like, which is usually a man that's on steroids and has fake teeth and perfect skin and, talks good. Their version of success is their actual life. When men win custody from being alienated for 3 years, 5 years, when men are falsely accused of abusing their kids, when men get arrested for that, and then win custody of their kids, the thing that's not possible, I can definitively tell you that it does not matter what they look like. It is not, most likely not going to be the image of what you want it to be. But they did the impossible. They are the heroes, straight up. Today, there was a hero on our, there a couple, and he always brings this up. I'm disabled, can't really function. He has sole custody of his kid. He stopped his child from being abused, and part of that was him being accused of abuse, it being taken seriously, and flipping it in the courts. And he always tells me, I want to talk to whoever. You can always give out my number. Be careful, be careful. I'm not gonna always do that because uh, you get people bombard you who don't understand. Maybe he's, man, I want to help as many people as possible. He doesn't look the part. You know why? Because he's actually a hero. So look, the truth in all of this is our culture created a lot of pain, but it also created such a desperate culture that we now shape our solutions in this quick fix way. We didn't do this to be malicious. We didn't do this knowing that it would cause more issues, but we just didn't know. And we need to start knowing. We need to start understanding that you can get muscles, you can do badass stuff, you can win everything, you can do all that stuff, but it's going to take more. And it needs to take more. Jiu-jitsu is not going to solve your custody case. Myself, dedicating 15 years of my life to that. I love it. Fighting is not going to do that. Doing therapy religiously, great thing, is not going to do that. It takes more. So, what actually works? What works? This is what you need to know. If you have a problem and you are a man right now and you resonated with any of these things, I want to tell you a generality of what's going to work. And you need to specifically focus on this, and you should be proud of this. You should not be steering away from this. If you really did read Marcus Aurelius, you should be, man, I want this. If you want to manage, reverse, stop, rebuild from any of these problems, custody, alienation, the court system, addiction, PTSD, you are alienated and ostracized by our culture for being called a toxic man, you are disenfranchised in any way, you need to understand that you will need a lot of time. You will need a lot of structure. You will need community. You will need good leadership. You're going to need discipline, accountability, and deferred gratification. If you ever want to know what virtue, what wisdom, what all these things are, you're not going to learn them from slogans. You're not going to learn them from just a motivational talk. You're not going to get them from feeling good now. You're going to get them from walking a long, hard road. An addict, if you get clean through methadone, ibogaine, if you're on an opiate, if you eat it like we all did in the past and suffer, and that doesn't make you a badass, but you know, you're going to have to do a long road after that. You're going to have to unwrite all of the stuff that goes in your brain, whether you had a reset through ibogaine or a boga or yahe or ayahuasca or whatever. You are going to have to work very hard from that. It doesn't matter how much toad you smoke. It doesn't matter how much deep work it is. You have to rewrite long, long patterns. You have to learn a new way to live. You have to learn a discipline. There's many different roads for that. I know a couple of them, but there are definitely way more. If you're a dad going through a custody battle and you're learning the lack of justice in the laws, you're getting screwed by the court system, and you want to fight for the rights, you believe now more than ever in this country. Maybe you're a vet and you fought, but now you believe even more in fighting for the justice of this country. And man, you're going to stand up for these rights. You're going to have to learn a long battle with many breaks in between. It has to be highly strategic. You have to block your emotions. You probably have no idea how severe that's going to be. And you will need a community. You will need other people. And you will need trust in that. Dads who are pros say, you have to be so razor sharp in how you think. Man, I know. You can't trust anybody. You have to believe in yourself because you're the only person. But you also need to learn how to curb that, to look at strategy of how other men did it. You're not going to believe it. That's hard. That's hard. This is one of the hardest things about my job. Is there'll be dads who have the fire to fight for their kids, and it's the right fire to fight for their kids. And I need to tell them, man, you need to stop. You do not know. You need to stop and listen. I need you to have this, but you need to stop and listen. Okay. It's very, very difficult. You're going through life. You can't, you're the angry kid who's been crapped on, nothing to trust in, bought into the red pill, got all the cool books, followed the online superheroes, did it, but they're still pissed off. And then when they talk about their anger, their violence, what they're mad about, they're being told they're evil, or a radicalized group tells them they're justified. Anybody who's willing to walk them through that, in many ways, rightfully so, says they have to stop because you're being toxic. But nobody will sit there and say, hey man, let's calm down. You can't do those things. I understand it. Here's what I thought. Here's how I hated. Here's what I did with that. Maybe you have to take that thought and it means something in the right container without acting on it. But this is what it is. It's like when you talk about helping men who have those thoughts, divorced men, vets with PTSD, men who are angry because they got screwed over by women or they were unpopular their whole lives. There's real vengeance that is going to come up with them. I don't want any of you to do it. Somehow this is a little bit more justified, but there's many of thoughts like this I've had in my life. But my first girlfriend was kidnapped and tortured for hours. I saw the people who kidnapped her, and then I walked across the street and they abducted her. They did all sorts of horrible things to her. And then 5.5 hours later, 26 miles away, they threw her out of a moving car with no clothes on. I was allowed to be angry about that. I was allowed to think thoughts that were extremely like we knew who did this and they couldn't get arrested. You can imagine what somebody would think when you're 18 years old and that happens. Whole family, you can imagine what somebody would think. Even that is questionable with me. Or even when I bring it up, it's like, well, why did that make you mad? Well, if you've experienced that, you would know why that made me mad. But many people will question this. Well, that was her thing. It was her thing. You're trying to hijack her, whatever. There's all sorts of stupid stuff that I've heard over the years. In this, I was allowed to think a lot of the thoughts that men think now. I was offered pretty poor therapy around it, but did get some and eventually found good people to work with on that. Man, how lucky was I for that? Because if you're a guy and society doesn't say you're justified to have those thoughts of wanting to retaliate, of wanting justice when it's not offered to you, you can't talk about it. You are seen as a danger by almost the entire therapeutic community. You're seen as a danger by pastors, by priests, reverends, imams, all these different things. So where do men walk with that? That, just like everything else, time, it's going to take structure, it's going to take a community, it's going to take leadership, it's going to take dedication, discipline, accountability. You're going to have to sit in pain and walk through it. And we have forgotten how to do that. Everything that's there. Okay? This is also why so many men fail at this. So few men get better because we're sold a quick fix solution. We want the bubblegum idea. We want the hero that fits the part, that is manifested from our pain to say is the solution. Because I feel weak, I want strength. Because I have less power, I want the guy with power. I want to be that. And we never learned the things which will actually get us wisdom and virtue. And now we have a culture of ignorance from it. You know, one of the things that I always thought, especially when the red pill came out, there's a ton of men who are badasses that I know. Just nobody looks at them. Why? Because I was already working with men for 10 plus years when it really, really hit. And it was like, man, my neighbor was a man that you could respect. He knew what right and wrong was from life experience, from the hard roads that dads will walk, from the hard roads that men will walk when there's two different directions and you do not get a result from either one, but you have to walk, and your life is to make the best of it. There are no men talking about that. So men don't fail. Men do not fail because they're weak. Men don't fail because they're ignorant. Men don't fail because they're stupid. Men fail because we have pain in our culture that is consistent, that makes it very easy for us to suffer from things that we know about: addiction, parental alienation, loneliness, PTSD. We have this over and over again, and men fail because those are easy things to happen. It's not happening to you because you're stupid, but it is your responsibility. You may have done nothing wrong, but you're going to have to do a whole lot to fix it. And you should be proud of that. And I get the animals of addiction. If you ever work with me on any of these things, I'm pretty harsh. If you're an addict, you're an addict. You got to get clean. If you go and do a couple flood doses of ibogaine, you still have to get clean. You have to change your life. It is your problem to fix. I don't care who gave it to you. If you're a dad going through custody, I get the pain. I get it. You want to give up and quit on everything, and you have every reason to. And I won't even blame you if you do. But if you want to change, it's your responsibility. You're still a dad. You don't get to stop. You're still a dad. You can't see your kid. You're still a dad. You go into jail, right? All of your friends are calling you an offender of words we can't say on YouTube or TikTok. You're still a dad. You want to give up today, give up in private. Go over on the couch, lay down. You can feel sorry for yourself because you have a lot of reasons to, but we have to focus back up on your court case. Somebody's writing in here that the system fails us. Usually we get a comment that the system needs to be changed. Usually we get a comment about how so many different things do not work and we have to tear it down and rebuild it back up. Good. But fix yourself first. Right now in our culture, I believe that's a bypass. That if you have a catastrophic problem that was given to you, like one of my friends being killed, like my first girlfriend being kidnapped, that is horrible. Horrible. I had no part in a lot of those things, but it's mine. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I had people in my life at some point to tell me, so what? What are you going to do about it? And then to help guide me further down. They didn't just abandon me and say, well, hey, here's this book and, prayer and do a mantra and you're good. No, man, those things. And I'll tell you this, I love all of that stuff. I love yoga. I love martial arts. I love fitness stuff. I love cultural exploration. I have all these things, all the things that we say are supposed to make us cool and have us live a cool life. And if we post it enough on Instagram, man, we're there. All those things have been realities in my life for quite some time. But I am most grateful for the people that could take me all the way down the road, but you're never done with until you die. The people that could say, no, here's the truth about what it is, and let's walk it all the way. All the way. That made me grateful for my pain, the suffering, for working endlessly with men who come to me. And like I said, who came to me and said, man, I need help. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I need help. Sometimes the best I had was just to sit next to him and say, okay, man, cool. I'll end with this. As somebody who literally has a group which has solved the problem of divorce and custody for men in the most tragic, most extreme cases, because that's pretty much all we take and see. People come to me all the time and say, solve my problem. People came to me today, solve my problem. I want this, and I want it done this way because I'm deep in my case and all sort of stuff. And I want to say the thing that helped most from the one person I know, me, who's created a group that has that can say that, sitting next to somebody in their pain with all to offer was, you have my solidarity and I will honor you and I won't leave you and I can't stop your pain, but I'll help you solve it. It's one of the greatest things. And nobody seems to want that or offer that anymore. And when it comes to the addict, which is where I learned it from, when it comes to the man who's angry and disenfranchised by our culture, same thing. Comes to the vet or the addict or whoever that has catastrophic PTSD that everybody says you can just beat it by running a marathon or something like that. I was always willing to sit next to them and say, hey, man, I don't know the answer, but I know at some point this pain will stop hurting. And I'm not just giving you some advice. I'll sit here with you and ride it out with you. The reason why I do that is because people did it for me. That is one of the greatest messages of masculinity. It's one of the greatest messages of life. And from that, you can learn great discipline, great caring. Man, it's the good stuff. You should be proud of it. So if you're in pain, it sucks. Get out. I want you out, but be proud of it. Be proud of it. You're on the road to a great, great thing. All right, let's answer some questions. You folks on TikTok have some things. Okay. Okay, so don't end just yet. What if we have a new divorce and she knows but brought me over to her house when my daughters hurt her? I do not understand this question. And I go over there. Okay, the system failed us, where tradition is abandoned, selectively rejected, and then imposed limits, yet preserved. So there's a lot of people who talk about the lack of culture and the lack of traditional, things, and I try and stay away from that because I try and focus on just what is the problem. And so I'm not trying to say like this is not the thing or whatever, but what I will say is that in looking at this from multiple angles, right? So this is one of the things that I think is important for you to think about in considering all of our cultural problems. Men, women, everybody's cultural problems, but I deal with men. When we got into the men's movement that started in the early thousands, like 2003, 2004, 2005, it actually came from the 90s, and there was a lot of propaganda in that men haven't had the rite of passage, that men haven't experienced these things. And so if we just were able to have them, they would solve all our problems. It's one of my favorite things. I went to go train jujitsu this one day. And this is actually in like 2020. So the culture is like on fire with all this, man stuff. And there's all this retaliation. And this dude, I had trained with him. We were about the same age. We were in our 40s. And he didn't know me. And this was at my gym, but he knew some of the people at the gym and they really liked him. It was post-COVID. So a lot of people are training in these small pockets. And so I go to train with him and he goes, sit down, man, sit down. He wanted to educate me. And I used to never wear my rank or whatever. Like, I didn't know him, but I used to teach at that gym. And man, now I'm old. I can't do anything. So I don't want to sound tough here. But he educates me and he says, "Hey man, I want you to sit down. You're training, whatever." He's giving this fucking speech, right? And he says, "We were men and we lost our rite of passage. You know what that means? We didn't have a rite of passage, so we got to be." And I go, "Dude, okay." And what's interesting here is I heard that speech in like whatever 2005 or something when I started working with people, and I knew the speech. I knew it. Sounds good, right? And in fact, of my unfinished book, it talks about this a lot, that there was no rite of passage. So within this, we go, man, there's no rite of passage. And, we don't have anything. And so men forgot who they were. And we have to find who we were. And we're warriors and all this stuff. And then he goes on to tell me about how great he is at leg locks or some shit. Okay. And then we fought. And in this case, in this story, I thought it was funny. I totally dominated him. Doesn't always happen, because in jujitsu, it doesn't have to do with your perspective or who you are or even your fortitude. If I just know a little bit more than you, I'm going to be able to tap you or defend your attacks against me. It's kind of that simple. It doesn't mean you're better or worse. It's like one of the great lies about it, right? And if you win at jujitsu, you're actually not a warrior. You're doing a sport, which is pretty cool and badass. And I love it. And I do not discourage that. But that doesn't mean that you've killed somebody or seen somebody die or had your life threatened to the point where you had to fight for it. So they're very different traits and they produce different things. Like, really think about this. Like, if you won a lot in jiu, like let's say you're a world champion, something that I never became close to, I was all right, right? But it's a skill, you can get good at it. And if you win those things, you had to do a lot. You had to sacrifice a lot of your life. You are one in the world who won. One person. That's crazy. It's a huge accomplishment. You are a badass for exactly that. But you don't know what it's like, and maybe through other events in your life, but you don't know what it's like to have your life on the line in war or in a violent situation. And those things change you. Those are different. We have people talking about being a warrior who don't know that. Like, we have a fanboy culture, fanboys of masculinity talking about real human traits and not actual things that came from that. And if you were in war, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've taken those things and turned it into like a great virtuous thing or whatever. Maybe you don't need to. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because usually if you were in war, there's some things that are going to be hard for you to process through it. Okay. So when we get into these anthems of what our culture is missing, if it's going to be missing a rite of passage, this is something we're clearly missing. Let's actually study what that is. It's funny, in all the speeches of rites of passage, all of them, it's that we get initiated to manhood and then we're men. You know what else is missing in there? This is epic. This is one of the best teachers I've ever had. She's going to hate me saying her name. Joe Todd. Boom, there you go. If you ever get a chance to work with her, she's awesome. So she knew the guys in the early men's movement. So she knew Robert Bly and all these dudes. And I was actually trying to look for Martin Proctal, who's still alive. I should probably find him, because there's work that I'm doing that I wanted some of the stuff he was saying on. And man, he says, awesome. He's great. If you haven't, Grief and Praise, watch his speech. Awesome stuff. And so Joe said, Steve, I want you to look this up. I want you to find it out for yourself. But in a rite of passage is set up by a culture. And so that means there's a way of life. And that way of life, the elders are walking those young men into manhood. And it doesn't stop there. They don't just get to be men and they're done. They have a responsibility of learning what the elders are so that they can have one consistent culture. What you're talking about with all the men stuff and questioning it, kind of rightfully so, is that they're just saying, I want an initiation so I can be called a man. And then I get to decide what that means. My pain of a boy in a man's body that's discovering I need a rite of passage gets to define what a man gets to be. Now, we might be going, man, I don't want to think that far, but let's actually look at this. Let's look at what is defining masculinity. It is the weak man, strong man is masculinity. Like we have guys giving advice about women, sex, and dating who don't have experience with that. We get into guys like Andrew Tate. He does, but he's like, I don't think you could be him. He's talking about stuff which is illegal, or at least what it's alleged that he does. And I think actually, anyway, but I don't want to get into it too much. But like, this is hard. Some average guy can't just be that guy. You can't be that guy. And what he actually is, I mean, he's a 3-time world champion. According to his court reports, he's also a lot of other things. And I know people that know him. I've never hung out with him. But I don't think he's actually lying. I think he's lying to you about his scams or whatever, his online programs and these types of things, or like his cryptocurrency. But of what he's actually saying, I just don't think you could do it, and it's not realistic. I don't think that's possible. But when you get to other guys, like other prominent red pill dudes, and they're talking about power or authoritative power or whatever it is that's attractive, I don't think that they've ever done that. I don't think they've ever come close to it. And so it's missing something. And so when you follow it and they give you a plan that you can follow, they're just selling it to you. And then you get angry, disappointed men. Anyway, all of this comes from the we have a broken culture and we need traditional values thing. Do we? I think it would help. Like but we're usually cherry picking what traditional culture that would be. We have a culture that's all over the place. Our culture is not going to go backwards. Our culture has a problem that even if you solve it for your family, which is good, that's great, which I think, you only have one lifetime, but we're not going to have the statistics to see if that has actually really worked. It's already not working. So since this idea germinated in 2016 or whatever, when people really started to get into it, it has failed. Okay. I agree. We need traditions, we need lineage. We've lost that. We need to find new ones. But if we just make up what that means and cherry pick it, we're going to fail. Like we need to stop being unwise, really. And so far, like I believe in this. Like here's another thing. Here, well, you can't see because I have it blacked out or just no lights on it. But there's a wall behind me that's actually white. And there, in man, maybe 2015, 2014, we interviewed all the popular paleo speakers that came through Austin. And they were here. And they all said like really good paleo stuff. And one of the things that always was a problem with me with the paleo idea, because I love it. I love the idea and I think it's healthy. But then you got guys like talking about, taking like 10 supplements a day, let alone hundreds, right? And neurotically working with their diet. And I just thought, well, if we went to actual tribal life, it wouldn't be a design where we have nature defining us. Okay, but now we can decide it because we can go to the store and buy stuff, which is good. I think this is good. I'm not saying it's either or. But you know what's weird is none of them did that. None of them that I know have done that. And I know a lot of them. And I have. And it's not as glamorous as you think, like living with a limited contact, no experience with the outside world, no electricity, no running water. You get hurt, you're screwed. I've done this quite a bit. And it is not like how any of the people sold it. Now, why did that? Man, there's all sorts of weird reasons. And there's a lot that I want to eventually talk about that. But within that, I realized playing, talking, the nature of man, the nature of woman, the nature of, and this is just one tribe that I've done this, and I actually know multiple tribes, but I've only lived with one for an extended period of time, for on and off for a period of 2.5 years. It's so different, you couldn't even describe it. It would be so hard to talk about it, but it's not any of that stuff. And it's kind of interesting. The women have one body type and they're pretty badass. They can do some crazy shit. They don't look it, crazy stuff. In fact, I wrestle with them all the time. We have a whole jujitsu club up there in the mountains. And dude, I've wrestled with professional female athletes that one of them just won a world championship. She's badass. Some of these girls up there are probably stronger. And of course, my friend is much better and she's trained, she's a black belt, all this sort of stuff. But it's nuts. And then the men, it's nuts. There's so much I could say about this, but I remember one time I had pictures from Instagram stuff, and we came down the mountain, and I got cell phone reception. And said, "Man, why do people do this? Why do people have plastic surgery? Why do people have this?" And the men too. Why do you guys look like this? It's cool, man. It's cool. They don't look like that. I say, well, a lot of them take supplements or whatever, and they're like, why? I said, well, because we can. But why? What does it serve? Well, because we can. It's our choice, right? We can. And when I described what plastic surgery was, they were like, "Man, that's so cool, but it's permanent." And I said, "Yeah." They could not get. They thought it would be fun to walk around with like a certain type of body for a day or two, and it would be so cool. But they couldn't understand why. And the more I described why, it was our choice. And I do believe it's a choice. Like if we've done any of these things or, we're supplementing with something for appearance, it's our choice. It's a part of our culture. Like we need to understand that. But this also probably causes some pain that is non existent to them, which is a whole different subject. But to describe to them that this was our choice because we felt bad about who we are, that we wanted to change our bodies, they could not get that. They could get feeling bad. They could get, wanting to change something, but they couldn't imagine cutting parts of their bodies off or changing it, or getting breast implants or, taking a chemical that would give us more muscles because it made us feel good because we felt bad about something. This blew their mind. Like the communication couldn't happen actually. And when you go there, they could never think that. There's nothing in their culture that would allow them to think that. There's nothing. And yeah, they could feel bad. They could not like something, but they all have at least enough value and sense of self and people and all the people around them they know. And there's all these hardships. There's plenty of bad stories, but so much to the point where they could not comprehend that happiness could be achieved from changing their bodies. Now we could take this thought away and then go like, oh, well, it means this and that, and that's a big jump. I would really warn you from doing that. It deserves more thought. But we have major problems in our culture that are non-existent. Drug addicts. So there's an interesting thing with Iboga. The Bwitu tribe does not say that Iboga is to cure addiction. They're like, we don't have this issue. It's for a completely different purpose. Iboga, a lot of people talk about ayahuasca and it's changing 10 years of therapy. I'm a fan of ayahuasca and yahe. A lot I could say about it. But what we're using it for is completely different than what a Shipibo tribe or a Kofan tribe or different tribes who've used it forever have used it for. Yet we want to say that we understand that. We want to use it for that. This is constant. misinterpretation of what values, tradition, or this thing can save us for. And what I will say is, I was always obsessed with, man, how can I just help you get out of pain and find function? Whereas everybody else, it's like, buy my 6-week program. And I've had 6-week programs. It's just, hey, after that, I'll work with you more. But everybody, it's like, get the picture, take my course, get the review later, bro. If you go to my custody page and watch those reviews, every single one of those guys, every single one of them is still in my groups. I probably don't go a week without talking to one of them. Actually, I'm thinking of one of them. I haven't called them in a while. I probably should. I know these people still. It's been years since they won their case. And the only people that will post testimonials are people outside of their cases, where they're at such a point of power they can post a video testimonial. And what's weird is people don't have that relationship with their clients. Like, no, man, I'm here to work with you until we're done, man. That's not like I'm going to keep it cycling that you're broken. So, no, man, let's work on the real shit. I always love it. Another jujitsu thing a guy told me, I was there training with him, and he said, no, man, I help with the deep work. I've heard this from multiple men. I'm not trying to single one person out. Like, it's very common at any men's gathering that there's an acknowledgement of male pain. And so at jujitsu or any mixed martial art thing, it's like, no, I work with men, but I work on the deep work. Oh yeah? Okay. Well, tell me about that. Like it's, and then they go on and they tell me. And I just kind of want to ask them, I'm like, well, so how many people have you worked with that have died? Because if you're working on the deep work of the deep cultural pains, maybe like addiction, it's kind of understood that there's a high death rate in that. I don't usually challenge them on that because I want to be nice and politely listen. But yeah. Anyway, there were some custody questions in here that I didn't understand. But I think those people are gone because I was rambling on about all this stuff. Somebody writes in, we're in a mess. Yeah, but let's get out of it. We should be honored to take on this work. Should be honored. And I'm not saying like I don't walk around and go like, I'm an honorable person. I walk around going like, no, man, this is the quiet work that nobody cares about that I'm going to do, because those were always the things that I wanted. Of course, I wanted to be famous and everybody liked me, and you get the doors open for you and all that sort of stuff. That's good, right? But I always wanted that to really be the representation of just being a good person. We're in a mess. Let's get out of it. We can. All right. I'm out, brothers and sisters on TikTok. You guys are awesome. I'm going to have to go. We're going to do some more live streams. I'm not going to do a call tonight. I'm sorry. A free call. And tomorrow I got to travel and I got to do the tomorrow traveling stuff. And we'll do hopefully another live stream then. I have it scheduled. It's also going to be on a topic similar to this one. And, trying to work on them and spread the word. I mean, like my passion is not divorce and custody. My passion is not unwinding traumatic sexual issues with men. My passion is working with people and helping solve their problems that are very difficult, that take a long time, that are not quick in what comes from that. And I really love it. So I actually prefer talking about this stuff more. And as I wrap my head around these things and work different notes and scripts, we'll get better at them and better. But that's the main thing. That's the cheeseburger, as my friend Gilbert, who stopped following me on social media. Why'd you do that, Gilbert? As he used to say all the time. That's the cheeseburger. All right. Later, TikTok. Bye. But YouTube, here we are. Dude, bros on YouTube. So on my other channel, this is a new channel on YouTube. Go subscribe to it. You probably already are. 4 cents. This is a new record on TikTok. On TikTok, 4 cents and 3 upped comments. I didn't get 4 cents on my other YouTube channel, or that didn't make sense. I didn't get 4 cents on my other TikTok videos that were streaming on my more popular YouTube channel. How come there's 5 people on YouTube now? There were so few. There's still so few. I don't want to leave you guys, but I think I got to. I got to pack, get ready. I am finally Giardia free. That's a bitch. That's what you get from living with Indigenous people. And so much joy. As Wade Davis wrote, and I now know, and I know, he probably knows more than me, but he said you can be flying on a plane with some sort of infection, and you're vomiting and pooping, and you're crazy, and you're so full of beauty and life, and you just want to go back. And man, I know exactly what he means. Have a good night, guys. Thank you so much for coming. Subscribe to the new channel. Spread the word. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it. Hope I said something that is some value to you and gives you pride in yourself because you're on an awesome road. All right, suckers. I'm out.